He's one of the most respected editors in the industry. She's one of the most revered realist painters in the country. So it is my great privilege to present this conversation.
Okay, I've never sat on a pedestal before.
You should.
I could get used to it. I like this. Thank you to everyone involved with LeQuire Gallery for having us do a little chat. This is fun. So the idea that we're part of a thing that's bigger than us is very exciting. That this whole situation when it comes to contemporary realism is thrilling. And Juliette is one of the leaders in the field when it comes to making great art that is not only noticed and valued in its own right, but also because she's such a great teacher, that she's influencing younger people, and I suppose some older people. You probably have students who are older than yourself, who are making great art in their own right. So it's exciting. This is a really great moment in the history of American contemporary art, and Juliette is one of the reasons why. So I'm thrilled to be with you.
Thanks, Peter. It's an honor. And thank you, Elizabeth, for hosting this event. We're really pleased to be here, and Andre and Alan as well.
Yes. I'm curious to know, at first, about the works of art here and how they came to be. And maybe we could work our way outward from there.
Yeah, all the work has been done over the last 2 years. And the funny thing is that the work was never designed to be shown, really. It's the first body of work that I've done almost entirely for myself. And it was a shift in my state of mind to some degree, because I was trained academically. I studied at various schools and studios all over the country, and New York, Minneapolis, Philadelphia, and I've spent so many years just setting up these perfect still lifes and then just getting lost in them that I never really looked around at my own life, and part of that was deliberate, because I always wished I was born in the 19th century. I read 19th century literature, I love 19th century art, and I look around at the contemporary world and it feels like, we're all in jeans and t-shirts. And suddenly it occurred to me that what if I were to go back? What if I were to leave? What if I were never to see the space I was in again? And I can't exactly remember why that thought actually struck me. Then I started noticing in a very acute way all the things I would miss. Have you experienced that at all? All of a sudden you think you're going to move, and the place that you've hated, like, oh my gosh, I never want to not see you and you and you. And so I went around to different places in my house and studio and started cataloging everything I could, and I wasn't in a hurry, so I would spend just weeks, and every time the light shifted, I would shift with it. And so it was kind of an interesting story of falling in love to some degree with my own life, which sounds bizarre, but true. So
That's very helpful. Thank you. So, just to be specific, I'm looking at, for example, the hallway there with the windows on the right-hand side, or there's a teapot with a kind of urban view beyond. Are these slices of Seattle?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah? Okay.
So the piece on the right and that one and the other piece over there, I actually found those setups. They're in my studio, and with the light coming in, and sometimes things just get stacked. And I looked over, and it's backlit. The lighting is a little bit funky, and wait, don't move, brushes and whatever. I'm gonna get right back to you. So those were just kind of found, and on my studio ledge, and then some of the hallways and the downstairs bathroom painting of the Gage Academy where I work. Often, it sounds cliche, but but a lot of it is light. Some of these hallways are pretty bleak if you just look at the sterility of the gray floor and the walls. But it's an old historic building, and there's depth to the windowsills, and when it comes in the right light, it doesn't matter how unattractive we are, under the right light, all of a sudden we're just gorgeous. And so I was able to see that and would wait to capture it.
Yeah, they are truly luminous, really
Thank you.
beautiful. Well done.
So each body of work, I get lost in an idea over a period of years, and it kind of unfolds. So work that I'm doing 2 years from now might be from a seed that's planted, now. And so for these, I was really interested in depth of space. Do you ever love two things that are totally opposite? So every time I'm around, if you go to a different landscape, you're in the desert, you're like, I love this is so beautiful. And then you're in the woods, I love this too. And so I alternate between, and you can see it in the work, a complete reverence for an austere sort of tonalist palette, and then the other part that just wants to go entirely the other direction. Every once in a while it collides and you're noticing that collision.
It works very well.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Yes, I agree. Yes. Well, it's interesting that even in these brief comments, I've heard Juliette riffing in such typical ways that you're one of the best read people I know, and you think very deeply about the history of art. And this idea of looking and absorbing. Not a single work of art here feels to me in any way derivative of some other master, and yet I see little touches that show me that you admire that master or mistress, or plural, masters and mistresses. That I think is such a great joy for someone like me, and probably for you, because it's about awareness of the past, but not being enslaved by it. And that's something that I think probably comes through in your own teaching, that you're talking about the fact that students need to look up the past, go to museums as often as they can. The idea that, that is something that the contemporary realist world is often whipped by outsiders about, that all you folks want to do is quote the past. Why don't you just go to the museum and look at Rembrandt or Leonardo and hush up? No, we need to borrow from the past what we need from it and make it our own. And that's what you do. This is your work, full stop. I can see it in the handling, in the selections that you've made, but I also appreciate the fact that you're looking at the past, or even at other artists working today, and tipping your hat to them. Recently that you made, that you thought, oh wow, I really want to know more about that, I want to work on that, or see more of that kind of art.
Yeah, it's interesting because with the new book that I just did on drawing, it was the inspiration for that book really comes out of, I don't know, it's an optimistic burst, but actually the genesis of it was pessimism, the fact that it's harder and harder to concentrate. It's harder for people to spend more time doing things with their hands. And so with drawing, if you can cultivate a love of drawing, you're really cultivating a love of concentration and appreciation and gratitude and all the things that come from slowing down, and it takes really slowing down. And so at the same time I was doing that, we had a number of big shows that came to Seattle. I think that one was the Wyeth show, and Andrew Wyeth, and he is such a contemporary, he wasn't painting Formica, even though he was painting through the 50s and 60s. So he was able to look and see in his own life things that he found beautiful and contemporary, and Wilhelm Hammershøi. And so both of those, then I started thinking, well, what is it in my own time that I can start to appreciate? So in a way, it was a total merging of the two projects. How can we share the love of drawing so that it survives for another generation? And how can I also preserve my own spirit in a way? So.
The books, to me, are forever, because we can put them on our shelves and we can read them when we want to, where we want to, with a pencil in hand or not. And I thank you for that. Tell me about what has driven that publishing initiative for you.
Yeah, there's a couple things. It's funny because when Peter's talking about the ephemeral nature of digital media, the act of creating a painting or a work of art is an attempt to connect with a different timeline, to try to make something for eternity, as build something that will outlast us. And there's a beautiful Ruskin quote where he said that my life was like every other life. I ate, I drank, I laughed, but a book, that's the best of me. You know, all the rest, he's melodramatic as a vapor and is no more. But I think I mean, you can appreciate that too, the desire to create something that is, well, I'm also a book lover, and I have all my best friends in books, and so it was both of those impulses, and a little bit of a Luddite, as well as someone who studied for a decade trying to piece together in utter confusion what a whole vision looked like, a whole roadmap for studying. Because when I was studying, there was no internet, and there wasn't a clear roadmap. The text dated back a while. There wasn't a lot of new things coming out. So it was really an attempt to solidify and understand it and put it out and all those things. It's funny, with all the digital media, we have so many different forms of communication. And I'm realizing more and more that all art forms have more in common than they do have, differences in many ways. And so all painting for me starts with an encounter, a feeling, an emotion. And one of the great aspects of painting is that, just like a book, if you connect with the piece, you're seeing through my eyes what I'm loving very deeply. And so it's kind of the craziest mind meld. There's no other communication form like it, where you actually get to be inside someone else's heart, like that close. And for the last book that I did, I was able to not just do it to preserve a body of knowledge, but to hopefully inspire another generation of people to cultivate a voice that they might not have.
I want to underscore the point that Juliette's generation came into art making with no roadmap. That cannot be stressed enough, that you and Jacob Collins and a handful of others have put this into a formal structure that other people, younger or older, can follow, because so much of that had vanished from view. Of course, it's centuries old, these ideas, these techniques, but they really had dissipated in the mid to late 20th century. And that is a whole separate lecture. We don't need to go into that right now, but the fact is it was invisible. And so getting books out, getting even lesson plans written down in various ateliers has been a huge step forward, because now we can share it much more easily without the 10 years of struggle, without the price tag visible. Why go through all that if you can get right to it? This notion of trying to get it down on paper and then push it out into the world. Tell me about the responses you've received from whomever read the books. This is the fifth, the fourth? Fifth. Okay. Tell me about the reactions. Now, there may be some very technical ones, but what about some insightful comments you've gotten?
Yeah, one of the interesting things about the books, when the first one, the first two books that I did, the idea, actually, the message behind it or subtext for doing it was less, I didn't actually think you could learn to draw or paint at all from a book. So I wasn't actually trying to do that. I was trying to do more of a reference. And my main goal for doing it was, at the time, you would have these magazines where they would show a Jacob Collins, like a beautiful portrait on one page, and you would turn the page and it would have, how to adhere elbow macaroni to a paper plate with a hot glue gun. Like, literally, you would find them on the next page. And so for me, the success in that book was simply to create a unspoken argument that these paintings, to connect them to artwork of the past. So if you look through the books, you'll just see this gradual timeline where you'll see these incredible artists, and side by side with some of the greatest works ever done, because they are that good. The contemporary painters are that good. And so by the time I got to the middle books, I was after something else altogether, and increasingly hands-on, and increasingly believe that you can learn a lot from that means. My most interesting response comes from people in prison. I get letters from people in prison who are working on painting and drawing. And one of the things that they struggle with is you're not allowed to work from life at all. Anybody or anything that you're actually seeing. So questions about working from there.
Well, it's interesting to hear about prisons. I hadn't expected that. And I think that's wonderful. You know, that's an audience that should be inspired and uplifted. You know, another criticism that's often lobbed at contemporary realists is, oh, it's always so beautiful. You know, the world is not only beautiful, it's not just pretty flowers, it's not lovely fields of greenery, it's also tough stuff. And why don't you depict that? Well, actually, we do. And if we look around here, there are some, you know, seemingly banal things like the bathroom, which becomes luminous in your hands. That idea of why shouldn't a prisoner paint something in his or her environment, not so much because it's pretty, because it's truthful. It's something about their experience and their world and their way of looking. That's actually very exciting and challenging and probing.
It was very, yeah, I mean, you bring up such great points.
Yeah. This aspect of the banal or even the ugly, of being disconcerted, not horrified or shocked, but slightly taken off guard. I think there's something in that.
Yeah, I think that we're kind of in a crisis of meaning culturally. And so I used to think that the people who painted, you know, beautiful paintings like, you know, Hudson River School or the Dorothea Lange like you have at the Frisk Museum were two opposite impulses. And I realized they're not. They're the same. Right now we're seeing the effects of when art mirrors a culture and you remove art from public schools because art has worked itself into a corner and become obsolete to most people. And so people are dying, I believe, for a lack of beauty and meaning. And instead of supporting it through the arts, you lob it off and do something ironic or sarcastic and just sort of reinforce what's already happening. So our job is to be bold and to put out something not everyone will necessarily agree with, but to say there's meaning still.
That aspect of dehumanizing is so frustrating to me, that art is not uniquely qualified because the other arts can also contribute to humanity, but visual art, as you just said earlier, communicates in a very specific way that words or sounds may not. Not everybody can catch a written word or hear an orchestra or a pop band play something and feel the significance of that. Visual art, for all the reasons that you outlined and more, is very special that way. And I'm concerned that we are now watching generations grow up who are not fully human because they're so distracted and not able to go into some sort of depth and calm down and look closely. The Da Vinci Initiative, could you tell us a bit more about that program and why it matters to you?
The Da Vinci Initiative is basically a program to bring skill-based art into public schools because you realize that in public, you know, it takes a huge amount of money to go and impact a culture through a giant foundation if you're going to do a head-on, you know, roll out something head-on. But if you go in the public schools, a few $1,000s makes it might be bigger than an entire art department budget. And there's sort of a blind eye to these just, you know, thousands of kids in every city that are growing up. In terms, art has been kind of co-opted by just sort of world culture or something, you know, something else. So visual literacy skills can be easily taught for very little money to a huge number of kids. And Da Vinci Initiative works with public school teachers to support them to get those skills and to be able to pass them on. There's a huge amount of excitement. It's really wonderful, and kids really can get it and can draw so quickly. They get it as sort of a first language. So, yeah, bravo to them.
The idea of drawing in particular as something that is a language. I love the fact that you use that word because, first of all, there's the common sense fact that if you get a child young enough, he or she will learn a foreign language with ease. If you wait too long, it's too late, and the brain has developed in a way that doesn't make it so easy to pick up that foreign language. I would argue it's the same with drawing. That, I mean, anybody can pick up and learn to draw, but I'll bet it's a lot easier if you're 7 years old than if you're 70 years old. And that's exactly what Da Vinci Initiative is trying to do, to get the teachers to know how to do it so that they can share the excitement with the young ones. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much. Thank you, Juliette.
Everybody for being here. It's really great.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Art, books, everything.